about the genesis story of each of our respective projects. I mean, you know, a lot of people came into crypto maybe a year or two ago. Ethereum was, you know, well established, but you know, not a lot of people hear about the genesis story. So I think that is a good place to start. Okay, well, let's start with Jay, because Jay's told me this story before, and I think it's very interesting. Not a lot of people know that All In Bits is actually the company startup behind Tendermint and Cosmos. And Jay has a very interesting story about why it is called All In Bits. Tell us, Jay.
All right, okay. Hi, I'm Jay. So Tendermint, the company, is called All In Bits.
Speak louder.
I'm trying. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So after college, I played poker for a long time. And I actually had a poker addiction, to be honest, right? I played a lot of online poker, in the card room too. And you know, there's like game theory and understanding the theory behind it and understanding what it means to like you know, moderate your emotions and moderate who you are and being objective, because the poker table will grind you down if you're not being rational. Right? It's really good at that. So
Put the mic closer.
okay, thanks.
And maybe turn off
In
your
2013, I had some money left over from my Yelp stock, and years of day trading and doing various stuff, and I had an option to, you know, I was like, okay, this is whatever I'm doing is not working, so I'm either going to become a professional poker player, or this Bitcoin thing's going to work out. So, you know, to be honest, yeah, I put all of my life savings, $30,000 worth, and you know, I was young and I'm a programmer in Silicon Valley, so I knew I was going to be okay, right? I wasn't being like, you know, naive. Because really, I had to make a choice. I had to get a job, or I had to make something else work. So I took a calculated risk and went all in into Bitcoin, because I realized this stuff is actually happening. And I started playing poker. I went to Las Vegas with the rest of my money and started playing. And I saw that Bitcoin was doing so well just after a week playing. It didn't make sense for me to play poker anymore. And so I said, I'm going to, okay, this is great. I don't have to play poker, a zero-sum game. I can actually focus on this Bitcoin thing and sort of diving into it. So yeah, the speculation got me into Bitcoin, and at first I was massively into, you know, just everything. I was naive. I had no idea, right? I was just learning as much as I could, and playing the speculation game too. You know, trying to move the markets, be a wall, right? Being on troll boxes. That's how I got started. And then after Bitcoin went to $1,000, it started crashing. I made some really bad choices along the way. I did not know that capital gains taxes were to be paid, so like I had some money left over, not, you know, significantly reduced from the peak of when I started, but I was like, okay, I can either pay all of this, you know, the capital gains tax, or I can just I'm not gonna talk about it. All right. What I'm saying is, I went all in. You know, and I said I'm going to go all in into Bitcoin and make this work. So here I am.
This is not an example.
No, this is not an exemplary story, but it's true.
It doesn't work every time, guys.
No, but you know, I did make a rational choice. I knew that I could get a job whenever I needed. You know, like I had that confidence, and if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have done it. It would have been insane. So, unless you're sure about your choices, you know, and the risks that you're taking. The one lesson I learned in poker is that the hardest lesson in poker is about risk management and not going broke. It's the thing that, even I haven't mastered, right? But so that's really important. Don't put all your eggs into one basket. Always be hedging.
The takeaway of Jay's story for me was that he had put 100% faith into something that he believed in, and put that money into Tendermint, and then built that software out, and then now we have Cosmos. Long story short.
Wait, what?
Okay, so Vitalik, it was in 2015 when Ethereum got started. Am I getting the dates mixed up? Or was it 2014?
Well, the idea came around at the end of 2013. The blockchain launched in 2015. Hey. Okay. So yeah, the idea came out at the end of 2013, and the blockchain launched in July 2015.
Yeah, so Zaki was telling me about the Genesis story at DEF CON 0 when Ethereum was conceived in that room with a bunch of people. But I would like to hear the story from you.
Actually, Carl, how did you perceive the beginnings of Ethereum?
Putting me on the spot, it was a wondrous experiment in, early fundraising and a ragtag group of wild and crazy, builders and believers in a decentralized internet getting together, with Vitalik, pushing everything forward and being awesome. Yes.
Carl, that sounded like the generic blockchain story of everything. More specific, please.
And it turns out I was not in the room. So this is. I came a little later. I was developing my rap career at the time.
So when did your rap career first intersect with blockchain land?
Well, I decided I was doing peer-to-peer, web torrent kind of stuff, and I was trying to make a peer-to-peer CDN. And then I was like, okay, at the same time, I also really like to rap. I just listened to a lot of hip-hop, and so I was like, okay, I could either, really be poor and, no one listened to me, or I could do the web stuff and, do things that people actually care about.
You just didn't believe in yourself for your rap career.
What is a career? I don't know. I am a Carl, and I, submit myself to you.
By the way, Carl is going to give us a rap show at the end of this battle. Let's give MC Carl some love.
Yeah. So I figured instead of repeating the Ethereum story 100 times, I could instead give the Genesis story of Casper.
Ooh.
Yeah. So. Ethereum's kind of proof of stake research first started around the beginning of 2014. I wrote this blog post about a consensus, a proof of stake algorithm that I called Slasher. And the idea here is basically it was the first proof of stake algorithm that penalizes you if you do something wrong. And this was the point of this was basically to solve this issue that every proof of stake algorithm had before, this nothing at stake problem that, because voting for a block is just signing a digital signature, why not vote for everything at once? And Slasher would basically penalize you for voting for multiple things at the same time, and by doing so, kind of force you to choose. So Vlad Zamfir, one of our favorite beloved researchers, I met him for the first time, I think in April 2014 in Toronto. And he very quickly started, doing consensus research and just randomly thinking about ideas for us. Initially, he was not that convinced about proof of stake. Initially, he started working on weird ideas that he called proof of work, which is basically a way to take a bunch of proof of work, smash them together, and have the result be verifiable more quickly than the original proof of work. And this was part of some of his very early scalability designs. And I thought it was cool, but I kept working on proof of stake. I kept churning out ideas. I kept coming up with weird things involving trying to deal with long-range attacks, trying to deal with nothing at stake attacks even more. And eventually, over time, we finally started realizing that weight proof of stake might actually be possible, and and at the same time, we were continuing to work on proof of work, and we had these very fun researchers like Matthew Wampler-Doty, Tim, I forget his name, basically people who actually helped make the final version of our ASIC resistant proof of work, and we ended up spending months on this, and the work was, maybe it paid off, maybe it didn't.
Vitalik?
Yeah.
Nobody can hear you at all because
Okay.
you speak right in the mic, right? Man?
Well, okay. No, the problem is if I speak in the mic, I can barely hear. Oh, well, okay, this is better. Yeah, no. So eventually, this ASIC resistant proof of work algorithm launched, and it could have paid off. It could not have. I mean, as we know today, Chjango is slowly starting to pop out ASICs for it, but. ETH did get a pretty good review on that blog post from that guy from SIA, who basically said that, even though all ASIC resistant algorithms are crap, ETH is one of the least crappy ones that he's had the misfortune to investigate. So that was clap to Matthew Wampler-Doty and co. But over time, we started doing more and more proof of stake stuff. We came up with this really weird idea called consensus by bet, where basically everyone would just bet on what the winning block is, and then the winning block is by definition the block that everyone bet the most money on, so it was this weird kind of circular game, and we figured that would come to consensus. That, we did a bunch of simulations, did a bunch of proof of concepts of this. It proved to be very kind of inefficient and very unstable, and Vlad started getting more and more kind of anal retentive about what properties he wants out of his proof of stake. So he's like, yeah, I think it might not be enough to resist 32% attackers. I want to resist 34% attackers, and I want to resist 51% attackers. I want my consensus to be so safe that it penalizes you for acting wrong, even if the entire consensus is controlled by one guy. And he kept on pushing, and I thought he was crazy, and I thought he was crazy, and he kind of is crazy, but just having him, his force behind us, just constantly pushing us to make the protocols better and better, eventually drove us to create algorithms that were, actually did do most of the things that he wanted us to do. So, Vlad's kind of crazy insistence actually ended up kind of helping. Around last year, 1.5 years ago, he kind of went off on his own, and he started doing his own branch of research into, correct my construction stuff, and at first I didn't understand it. Over time, I began understanding it more, but at first I didn't understand it, so at first I just kept on working on stuff on my own, and eventually, we had Vlad, who came up with his own algorithm that he called Casper the Friendly Ghost. We had myself, who came up with this algorithm that we called Casper the Friendly Finality Gadget. That started improving over time. We had some people formally verify it. We had Carl do a lot of help in actually implementing it. And now we basically have these two kind of families of Casper, where one is well on the way to actually being adopted, and the second is well on the way to having some kind of testnet. So, and later on being adopted over time as well. So, yeah, I mean, that's where proof of stake in Casper is now. So everyone give a round of thanks to Vlad.
Yay, thank you, Vlad. And thank you, Joseph, for coming up with Plasma, another scalability solution. Tell us a story about Plasma, please.
Hi, can everyone hear? Okay. Yeah, so a lot of blockchain constructions rely on, a lot of different mechanisms, and I've always been interested in a lot of the mechanisms that, blockchain gets you. I first started thinking about a lot of the coordination aspects and scalability aspects related to Ethereum. I think was just a lot of back-channel communication with friends, even before Ethereum was released, and sort of been in the back burner and thinking about this stuff until collaborating with Vitalik on it. And I think a lot of the people working on it now are doing really, really well. People like David Knott doing a lot of leadership on this. So it's not really a singular effort. It's an effort that's like a fundamentally open source at its core, which is really possible only now with the blockchain community and like the legacy of like open source software and things like that. You know, that said, I think what I find interesting about a lot of the expertise in this space is that, you know, like what Jay was talking about with poker, I think one commonality of a lot of the mechanism designers in this space is that, you know, a lot of us are a bunch of weirdos, and a lot of us had a lot of experience with games in particular. You know, games let us model these things which we wouldn't be able to do, you know, otherwise testing it in the real world, you know. There's this dynamic with mechanism design that I'm sure Jay can attest to that's very similar to poker, which is, you know, people behave very, very differently when you play poker with fake money, right? Like when you play with real money, you act really, really differently. So a lot of the mandate for all of us on stage is, you know, modeling as much as we can when it comes to the dynamics and the mechanisms and the human interaction and the game theoretic incentives. But modeling only goes so far. You know, at a certain point, you have to test it live, and you know, that can end up being fairly expensive for some tests, which is why I think a lot of us are able to do reasonably well in this space and have intuitions around the space due to our experiences with various games. You know, I think, you know, for example, Vitalik and I think Carl, you both have experience with like World of Warcraft and the dynamics with that, and I think that can be pretty formative. Vlad and I have had, you know, deep experience with stuff like StarCraft and various other games, and I think, yeah, and it's good as well, you know. So it's in like some of the more, you know, adversarial wackos in this space maybe have experience with EVE Online, but you know, nerd joke there. So I think like that's a lot of the factor when it comes to like, okay, where do these technologies come about? And sometimes a lot of the experience comes from like years of video games, and that's why like a lot of the experts in this space come out of the woodwork from like what seems to be nowhere, but really it's you know, many years of expertise just modeling these things out. In an environment that's the only way to really model things out, where, you know, human incentives come to play.
So what you're saying is all these second layer solutions for blockchain scaling was all thanks to StarCraft.
Not just StarCraft.
And Dota and Warcraft.
Yeah.
League of Legends, what have you.
Muds. Started with Muds.
Muds.
Yeah.
Ultima Online. Let's go all the way back. I myself was Vengeful Spirit in Dota 2. All right. So Kelvin, would you like to introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do? I don't think most people are aware, including myself.
Kelvin's doing really awesome stuff on Plasma
Yeah.
too.
Does this work?
Does this thing work?
Okay. Hello. Hi, my name is Kelvin. I work at OmiseGO, and I do research on plasma, among other things.
Kelvin's really awesome with the research. Doing really awesome.
I try. I would love for other people to tell me that I'm wrong about stuff, because I have published stuff that is blatantly wrong and I haven't edited it yet.
No, you haven't.
There is one thing. I won't tell you what it is, but I'm going to edit it after I land.
How did you get into this?
It is a long story that involves sneakers. Yeah, so do you know what a hype beast is? Alright, so I used to, and to some extent still do, kind of a lot of things with sneakers. Turns out you can sell sneakers for a lot of money, and I started off and I was like, okay, so I just did it because I was in college and needed money, and very quickly realized that it was a really interesting computer science project, where it turns out to buy a bunch of sneakers, you basically need to write these hyper-efficient sneaker bots, and
So you start getting into like writing Python stuff, and then it starts getting lower level, right? Like you start, you end up not being able to use requests anymore because requests just isn't fast enough. And then you start having this infrastructure where I had this like whole server monitoring infrastructure where it would just make all these proxy requests all over the place, and then with all this WebSocket stuff, so I could distribute it and then manually click stuff because sometimes my bots don't work. But yeah, so this is where it started, and then eventually I started looking at Ethereum a little bit and thinking about tokenizing this stuff because I was just really into sneakers, and I figured, what can I tokenize? Probably sneakers. One of my friends out there, we actually, we worked on this for a little bit, and so we had this whole thing going. We were talking to consignment stores and trying to see if, because there's this whole verification layer, they have sneakers, and so that they're real sneakers, and so you can tokenize them, and then you can start trading sneakers as if they were, some tokenized asset. So yeah, thank you, Kanye West. To some extent. Yeah.
That's great. Hello. Shit. Hello. All right. We'll open this up to the audience for Q&A. Whoever's got questions for our panelists.
And as you think, I just wanted to point out something. One thing that Joseph said, where it was like, Plasma is this open source project, and it's this kind of like combination and shared ideas that people are just putting out there and talking about. Then another thing where you were talking about how you have something that is blatantly wrong out in the public, and that's okay. So I just want to encourage everyone to collaborate, share ideas. There's no reason for secrets. There's no reason to hold back. Just learn and contribute to this body of knowledge that we're accumulating in this open source manner.
But what if someone copies your idea? But what if someone copies your idea?
That's good, because these ideas can change the world, and so we need ideas to be copied. We need these ideas to propagate across all humanity.
Yeah, I mean, as long as they start with copying sensible BFT algorithms, that's a great start.
Exactly.
Copying
if you come up with an original
BFT
idea, I will donate, I will give you everything, because I don't think they exist.
Okay, so why share when you can keep it secret, right? Why let others copy? Why not use the patent system to prevent others from innovating? So, have you guys heard of Roko's basilisk?
Oh, jeez.
Who's heard of Roko's basilisk? Okay, yeah, rationalist here. So I feel like there's actually a beneficial version of Roko's basilisk that says, it's going to look at what you've done, see what you've published, what you've innovated, and really see who copied what, and then just retroactively figure it out and say, yeah, these guys are innovating, and then you can start rewarding them post facto. So I feel like there's an opposite version, like Santa's. It's like Santa Claus.
You realize that
basilisk.
you've basically reinvented Christianity using a causal trait, right?
Is that right?
Pascal's reading in a different way.
Sorry?
Pascal's reading about why believe in a God.
Why believe in a God?
No, this is literally God will reward you if you are nice, but by the way, God actually exists because we will create him, and there's some logical proof that because he's super rational, he's going to have some utility function that retroactively rewards us. It's great.
So, Q&A.
I'll bring up the Q&A. All right, next topic.
I was just talking about engineering.
Hey, I'm Zach Sikowski, and now first of all, thank you all for speaking. It's very insightful. And I had a question for Vitalik on Joseph's point about how playing games, modern games in the real world, helps you get into this space and really understand the game theory behind blockchain. Do you think that Vitalik, what do you think World of Warcraft taught you? What experiences did it give you about when you were creating Ethereum?
You mean aside from teaching me about the horrors of centralized services?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry, you're not gonna have.
No, that's I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure exactly what's kind of that directly applicable. I don't know. I know that I'm supposed to give some off the cuff fancy answer that's like really impressive, but I really can't.
You played the stock market, the auction.
Oh yeah, the auctions. Yeah, like basically like I pump it up to like Nether Weave or like Mage Weave Cloth or something, and like it was great.
Alright, wait, I got one.
You got it.
So like in StarCraft, if you want to destroy like an enemy base, sometimes you have to get all these Zerglings, which are like really cheap creatures you can make really quickly. But like you don't want like a little small army. You want like 200 to descend at the same time. So like, that. Well, maybe it has something to do with Byzantine fault tolerance, but I don't see a point. Oh wait, no. It's actually, if you look at the story behind the Byzantine generals, it's about coordinating an attack to make everything simultaneous. So, it's very relevant.
I run a cron job every 15 minutes that plays the Neopets stock market. So, there you go. Neopets.
Some like interesting thing that someone proposed to me. They were like, "Oh, we need a platform where we can create economic incentives and like just simulate like what would happen if those economic incentives, what would people do in that circumstance." And I was like thinking about it, I was like, yeah, we need this test bed. We can learn so much about economics and game theory. And then I was like, wait, that's Ethereum. That is literally what we're doing. We have this weird game that you play online that you make fake, but money that we care about because we care about it and blah, 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 So we're all in the game. Welcome.
Do we have other people with questions?
What do you guys do when you're not working and are thinking about blockchain and crypto?
I go to subreddits like r/bad mathematics and laugh at people who think that 0.99999 repeated does not equal to 1. No, like seriously, I just like read random stuff and like try to learn random stuff.
For example?
That 0.999 blah blah repeated
Another example?
Let's see, it's an interesting. Oh, here's a good one. Did you know that there's no there's no palindromic number with an even number of digits that's prime? Like it's literally impossible to have that. And this is true not just in base 10, but in any base. And like you could actually prove this really easily. Like basically the base plus the base plus 1 is guaranteed to be a factor because of like alternating sum stuff. Oh, and like 11 is the only exception. But like anyway, yeah. 11 is the
I can't say that my mind wanders to those topics one time.
Oh, and like other fun stuff that everyone should learn is like how ZK snarks and ZK starks work. Yeah, it's like actually not that bad. They're like,
And where can they learn that?
On Vitalik.ca.
I rap to myself in a quiet room, and it's like talking to yourself, but you pretend it's practice.
Can you rap?
At some point.
I read the world news and collapse subreddits all the time. Yeah. It's not even depressing anymore. It's just like, yeah, this is what needs to be done. Okay, let's do it. We can do it.
Alright. I read a lot of papers and I build Neopets bots.
The Neopets is CryptoKitties.
Yeah. These bots.
Next up.
I don't know. I think like lately I've had less time, but in the past, lots of video games, lots of watching cartoons.
Which ones?
Which anime?
Are we making a top list of what's good and what's bad? Oh, that's putting me on the spot. Serial Experiments Lane, that's a classic, right? Girl Dog Hound is very inspirational. Science Days and Emergency. I don't know.
Hey, we're all weirdos, I love it.
My favorite kind of anime is probably the fourth kind. Hey, we're allowed to assume axiom of choice.
Cowboy Bebop only. I don't know. Maybe I just need to watch more.
Death Note is pretty good. So not a lot of people in this audience watch anime?
Normies.
You've all just been dubbed normies! No, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep it on, maybe.
I think this needs to be a weekly talk show, by the way. So, and I can't wait to see Carl rap at the end with Vitalik as the hype beatbox guy. So, just a quick question: where are we up to with Plasma in terms of going live public?
When it's ready.
And I would say that over the last 6 months, we've seen a lot of work get done on kind of specification and formalization. So we have Plasma MVP, we have Plasma Cache, now we have Plasma XT. No Plasma Unlimited yet, but that's obviously going to be the next one.
No, Plasma Cache is Plasma.
Correct. And Plasma XT is Plasma Cache. Is Plasma. And basically each of these iterations try to basically bring us closer to realizing that we're really having a fuller grasp of specifically the kind of primitive that we're using when we're building Plasma style systems. So specifically this idea of using transactions that are kind of committed into a Merkle tree as a kind of positional scarcity. So the idea that at any particular position in a Merkle tree, you can only have one transaction, and how you can use this to basically enable a fairly large number of off-chain operations to happen at the same time with one single on-chain transaction. And I feel like we're coming closer and closer to understanding, the frontiers, the limits of these kind of approaches. So for example, at this point, I'm fairly confident that channel-like systems and plasma-like systems are basically the only two categories of off-chain scalability of that type. And that's not something that I would have felt as confident saying 12 months ago. And I think, we are going to improve the extent to which we can come up with a formal theory for how these all of these different approaches work. And I think there's been a lot of work starting to be done on implementation. I hope that we're going to see more work on things like auditing, standardizing, formally proving contracts, and we get to the point of having software development kits. So if you have some corporation that wants to build some consortium chain on some crappy semi-centralized ledger, we can tell them, hey, build a Plasma chain, and they'll be able to actually do that, and they'll have even more scalability and even more decentralization than they otherwise would have, and it'll be great.
And Jay, you're thinking about implementing some of those components into Cosmos as well, right? As an exploration.
Yeah, the software development kit that Cosmos is building that it is currently stable. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then plans with Tendermint and Plasma.
Right. Okay.
What is the Cosmos SDK? What is it used for? Why do you want that?
So whatever virtual machine you use, like ultimately you want a language that you want to develop your blockchain in. And so there needs to be a robust ecosystem of libraries that like help with your blockchain production. And so, in the Web 2.0 world, the web frameworks came about, like Chjango and Ruby on Rails and so on. Solidity and the Ethereum ecosystem is a great way to create dApps that run on that virtual machine environment. On the other hand, like it's a new language, and there's also like other tooling in other languages like Golang that are more mature than Solidity that you might want to work with instead, because these languages provide very specific features, and they're all the design choices behind every language kind of create the experience of programming something. So if you want to create something that's very complex and rich, then you might want to use Golang instead of Solidity. And this might change in the future as Solidity evolves too, and the EVM becomes more, the optimizations become much better too. But currently today, if you want to create a blockchain that's very complex and requires, and you want the Golang toolchain to create, then the Cosmos SDK is a great place to start. It's basically like Ruby on Rails was for websites. It's like a blockchain framework for Golang. It's got, it's very modular, and the design is, we're really proud of it. So if you invest in that architecture, then it's, for the long run, it's something that will help you produce a scalable and secure blockchain system.
So with Tendermint and Plasma chains, how do we have something in the works for that?
Yeah, so it sounds like, my understanding of Plasma is that it's about, fault accountability, right? Knowing, figuring out that there was an error, fault attribution, and also figuring out what to do in the case of faults. And it seems very compatible with the concept of, Cosmos IBC. There's some slight differences, like in Cosmos IBC, like we let you like jump over block heights, right? So like you don't have to commit everything onto the Cosmos hub all the time. You can skip over, and then that creates like a fee mechanism based on how often you need it. You'll pay more to keep more up to date. And it's not clear yet how to incorporate that with the Plasma model, as far as I know. I don't know how to do it. And so it seems like these are research areas that still need to be done. Making it Plasma work for like skipping blocks.
I think this is something that Kelvin can enlighten us on the research front.
On Cosmos, or what are we talking about?
No, on Plasma.
What about Plasma? Everything? Or
I think maybe I can.
Oh yeah, okay.
I think one thing. No, it's off. Is this on? Hello? Okay. Yeah, I think one thing to be cognizant of is a lot of the design decisions of a lot of what we work through have a lot of similarities in designs, and also a lot of unique aspects. For example, Cosmos is really excellent for replacing a lot of the existing efforts with consortium chains in the current space right now. But a lot of the value and sort of the reason why we're here together is sort of showing in physicality a lot of the collaboration that's necessary in the space. I think there's like a lot of efforts and a lot of silos, but being able to build robust systems, one that is actually decentralized and resilient, requires a lot of coordination among a lot of different projects. A lot of us we're doing, and part of this is social proof that a lot of the people standing here are like interested in things like interoperability, among different blockchains even.
And that's demonstrated through this presence, and I think a lot of other blockchain projects, for example, having hostility towards interoperability creates silos and basically prevention of notions of being preeminent coin and things like that.
We'll take two final questions and then move on to the real serious part of this talk, which is truth or dare.
No,
And
no, we're not doing that.
okay, minus Joseph. He's not doing. All right, two more questions, and then truth or dare, if you guys want to play, and then and then Car's gonna wrap. Do we have questions from the back? Back, people in the back.
It's hot potato. If you have the mic, in 3 seconds you have to ask a question.
Someone in the back have a question?
All right.
Why do you have such a positive attitude? I just love it.
Because I think that positivity is a better strategy than negativity, and I just believe it, and so I'm gonna go for it. It's the world is hard, and I'm not saying it's not, but if we if we try to succeed and then we fail, it's way better than trying to fail and then failing.
I would argue that you succeeded at failing.
All the time. You have to fail. Fire, aim, ready. What was it?
Ready, fire, aim.
There we go. Dyslexia.
Oh, maybe you should aim first.
Maybe I should aim first.
Hi, what's going on with DICO? Are you still with DICO? Should ICO also be decentralized? P.S. I love you.
I mean, DICO, DAICOs, decentralized autonomous ICOs, are not a thing that
Hold the mic for you. That's what you were saying.
Are not a thing that I'm with or not with, right? It's an idea. I made a neat research post, and I hope people do good things with it. I'm not launching the DICO. I'm not launching a DICO coin. I am not gonna. The idea is out there, and I encourage people to go ahead and try it. So why haven't more people tried it yet? Yeah.
Is the utility token dead?
What is the kind of on recordness of this conversation?
Not on record.
Very on record.
Depends who you ask.
Off record.
Philosophically, not legally.
Hey, I got something. So in a staking token, if you don't do the right thing, you lose it. But the concept of a utility token doesn't seem to quite convey that, right?
No.
Is that weird? So what do you call something that you can lose for not doing the right thing?
So first of all, do you mean a medium of exchange token, or do you mean a consumable token? Because remember, I think medium of exchange tokens are generally stupid, but consumable tokens are kind of economically legit in some cases.
Let's say a token that is required to, or a token that you need to use for participation being a node in the network.
So you need to consume a token in order to be a node.
A staking token, essentially.
Okay, so staking token's not the same as a consumable token, right?
Yeah.
No, staking tokens, I think, are a theoretically totally legit way to do stuff. Or it's as legit as it comes in the space so far.
Okay, as in should we continue to develop thoughts on how to develop the taxonomy or models for utility tokens?
Sure, I suppose. Though, I do recommend that people try to kind of bring in people with more of an existing economics background into this, because there's a lot of just kind of people waving their heads. waving their hands in the air and trying to come up with ideas based on kind of what sounds nice to them that doesn't really make economic sense. And it would be good to have something with a kind of firmer theoretical footing so we can properly understand and map out the space.
The other thing I think is also is also like taking a position of definitions is not that effective in this space simply because everything looks different and we're all designing new crypto economic models. So if you call something a utility token versus like a whatever token or whatever else, like like oftentimes it's a hybrid of these types of things. Like the only like categorical thing you should be determining is like, is this thing a scam, yes or no, right? Like that's a categorical thing that you can decide upon. But like definitions like utility tokens, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, I think there's like intentional scams, and then there's things that are not like scams in the sense that developers want to trick someone, but where the token model just like totally does not make any sense whatsoever. And of course, the token holders have no incentive whatsoever to discover that their token model makes no sense whatsoever. Yeah, so you do.
So, in terms of like a utility token or moving that forward, what kind of mechanisms should we be thinking about that are the right ways to think about these tokens that aren't like security tokens, essentially?
Like, I think trying to have an economic model of the price is just like one decent way to start. So like basically prove that there is some reasonable way to value the token that doesn't depend on weird assumptions about people voluntarily holding it and for some period of time and not just selling it immediately on decentralized exchanges even though they exist.
So it's less about like finding the right mechanism than it is like you have a goal and then you find the mechanism to achieve that goal. That's the approach you should take first and foremost.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that we need to focus on is like, okay, how do we develop the tools to analyze mechanisms? And we need like the right kind of concepts, the right building blocks. So it's like, these are all economic mechanisms, and we can look at the economic mechanisms and we can determine their properties. But then like kind of classifying, this is a utility token, this is a blah 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 blah. I think that's super early. I think we just need to like figure out like, okay, this works, staking works, slashing works, all of these different things.
Okay. Sorry, can I? I want to add something if you don't mind. This is how I classify it. Virtual currency token for fee payments, gas payments. There's a security token as a passive investment, utility token for utility stuff, and staking token for like staking or reputation token. I call them reputation tokens, like Augur Rep. And the way I think about maybe what opportunities there are still to explore and need to be explored is maybe doing something more along the lines of local economies and helping like foster like universal basic income perhaps at a regional level, like as an example. So for clarification, a token that has some intrinsic valuation that people can understand that doesn't depend on just arbitrary holding or other mechanisms like that. Nothing based on like arbitrariness.
Remove ambiguity.
One final question.
Vitalik, in World of Warcraft, what was your mains, race, class, and spec?
Gnome, warlock, siphon life, and like whatever the level 30 thing in demonology is, I forget. Yeah.
I'm going to ask one more question if I'm allowed. Talking about new opportunities, zero knowledge proofs, cutting edge, like selective disclosure and being able to get the results of information that's been processed without actually revealing the information. What are your thoughts about that? Where do we need to go with it, and so on?
Oh, I think it's like absolutely incredibly cool, and I'm like very excited about the use cases for that in identity systems. Like I hope that like Uport and people like them that are working on this and like totally have like some kind of like internal or external zero knowledge proof team, and they know what they're doing in terms of people being able to like prove claims privately. One particular use case that I'm interested is non-outsourceable claims, or rather kind of non-transferable proofs. So the idea basically is that I prove to you that either my identity has some attribute which has some property, or you signed a message. And if I send a zero knowledge proof that says this to you, then you know that you didn't sign the message, and so you know this attribute is true. But if you then take my proof and send it to any third party, that proof becomes totally worthless because you, by signing a message, could have just produced a fake proof. So it's like a proof that is only valid for one particular party. And I think that is one interesting way to potentially increase privacy in a lot of these systems, because as we found out with things like Cambridge Analytica, part of privacy involves these user experience issues and the ways that they compound in terms of applications and how data gets passed around between contacts. And so if we make sure that data actually transfers less, and the way that, and when you're transferring data, you're actually specifically, you actually are in some sense transferring it to one party and one party only, because that party has no way to pass it on to third parties. I think that could be an improvement to privacy in general.
Could you give a use case?
Yeah, so use cases for kind of identity attributes in general, a lot of them have to do with kind of unique mappings to real world identities. So things like voting, and that includes regular voting, it includes quadratic voting, and it could include accounts and kind of different kinds of fiat-backed payment systems. I mean, some of them might end up being nationality dependent based on the regulations, some of them might not, it depends.
So in the commit reveal process, or
well,
access control?
Yeah, well, so the big one if we're talking about just a unique mapping to national identity, that's the idea would be that basically you would be able to send a vote or some other operation, and you'd be able to prove that this vote is signed by someone who's part of some approved set, but you would also not be able to prove that you did not cast another vote with the same identity. So you have kind of both security guarantees and anonymity.
Wouldn't that be outsourced to the person who is responsible?
Oh yeah, so identity, so this identity stuff totally depends on claims, right? So it totally depends on a trustworthy identity issuer. Now, outside of trustworthy issuers, there are interesting ideas around decentralized identities. So there's Avogadro trust metrics, there's various kinds of reputation and ranking scores, there's all of these kind of more theoretical mathematical ideas that people are trying out, and I do think those are cool and are promising, and people should try to implement them more. But we are still fairly far away from that stuff actually being live, and realistically, the centralized stuff is what's going to come out first. But I support both.
Thank you. Can we do another question?
Final question.
All right.
Seriously, the last one.
All right, so we hear a lot about token models and things like that, but there's cool projects on Ethereum, for example, like ENS, that don't have anything to do with tokens.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think blockchain projects, the reason they get all this hype is because they kind of require a token model to be popular, or do you think there's still a future to be discovered in non-tokenized models on the blockchain? Anyone?
There are still a bunch of very novel things that you can do on a blockchain that people just haven't even thought about yet. I've had this discussion 8 times in the last 2 days, but basically people keep trying to apply traditional ideas, and they're okay, let's put this traditional thing on a blockchain. And there are a lot of primitives that a blockchain gives you that people just don't consider, and you can create these new things that might look like tokens or something, or they might even be tokens at all, but that just abuse cryptoeconomics, right? It's really cool. And so I think that we'll start to see that more, so things that don't even look like tokens anymore, but use cryptoeconomics in some sense.
Can you give an example?
Okay, so this is a terrible example that I came up with last night when I was very sleep deprived. But I was thinking about, so let's say, how can we incentivize art? I was talking to David about this. So how can we incentivize people to make a bunch of art, right? And the concept is let's say I buy some tokens, whatever, and there's 100 tokens that I can buy, and then there are 900 tokens that might get released onto this marketplace And the more art that is produced, so the tokens are a claim on the art, and the more art that's produced, the more of the 900 tokens that get burned, right? So the holders of those initial 100 tokens have like a huge incentive to just basically get people to create this art and then burn the rest of the tokens because their claim on that art is greater, right? And then after some period, the rest is sold to everybody else, right? So it is like a token, but it's a completely different model from what people might typically consider a token sale. Anyway, there's probably a million reasons why that doesn't work, but
what classification of token would that be considered? I don't know.
Sorry, I gotta cut you off right there. We're running out of time, and that means, unfortunately, we're going to have to skip Truth or Dare. Sorry, guys.
Thank God.
But we're not going to skip Carl's rapping.
Oh boy. Oh boy. So I'm supposed to do this now, I guess?
Yeah, you're gonna do this right now.
You're the one who's wrapping this up.
I'm
The dopest MC.
So the dopest MC, Carl Floss. Now, I normally rap with a beat, but I feel like it's too much work. So I'm probably not gonna do a beat. No, a bad beat is probably worse than no beat at all. But no, actually, I don't want to call it bad. That's judgmental. Now, so everything I do is improvised off the top of my head. Not to say that I haven't said it before or in some kind of weird form, but I'm curious. Please give me a word to start with, and then I'll go off for a little bit. Oh, and it can't be blockchain because I don't really rap about blockchains because I don't have feelings in blockchains. I have feelings in human words.
Pterodactyl.
Pterodactyl. All right. Exactly, that's exactly the word. Anyway, pterodactyl, I rap a fractal, my mind is so motherfucking natural. Oh, I should have said, this is not gonna be PC, my mind is so easy to be talking about all of these words and these curses. I don't know what I'm saying in these verses, but I don't really care because I got the worstest kind of disease. I'm trying to be disease, I need, and that's all I think in my mind when I do things. I can't be on this, I am ruthless. I don't really want to be there, doofus on the microphone. I'm doing it on and on and on, like the beat goes on and on and on, repetitive, editive. I mean, I'm just editing my corrective. I'm doing this shit, never gonna be disrespected it. And damn, what you really wanna do? I'ma be that motherfucking other Jew. I don't really wanna do what I've been doing. I'm on the right. I do it for him, Andy Warhol over here. Maker Dow, shout out.
Thank you, MC Carl. That concludes the Ethereum evening event. Thank you everyone for coming. There's still like 20 solid minutes of networking to do, so get your elbows greased.